So this morning I'm on Twitter. It was 11:09 a.m. and I tweet out a question, as I sometimes do, in sort of one of those autopilot moments, just kind of like to have a free-flowing conversation with you. And I said, and I quote, "When blank happens, it'll turn college football upside down in 2021. I just asked you to fill in the blank. The only guideline I gave you was it has to be somewhat realistic." Well, we got some, to varying degrees of realism. We got some, and I wanted to go down the list because you guys did such a great job. I figured let's just go ahead and lead the show with this. Again, these are not official predictions, although they all could happen. The first one, and I think maybe one of the more popular ones, was Ohio State being upset early in the season. So let me kick you this scenario. It's week 2, right? And Oregon's playing Ohio State. Well, that's not what we're going to talk about. I think everyone's attention is on week 2, but a lot of you said, excuse me, this is not NFL. It's not a preseason game when Ohio State goes up to Minnesota on that Thursday night in week 1. Like they're actually going to count that in the Big Ten standings. Hey, what if Minnesota just outright beats the Buckeyes? Thursday night in week 1, what if it were to happen? And before you tell me, well, I would just be gobsmacked. On what planet could that happen? The spread's 13.5. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. Our buddy AFP, among several others of you, submitted this as a potential scenario. Now, here's the way it probably happens, or the reason it probably happens, or reasons. AFP kind of submitted it, and I just went along with it. It would have a lot to do with probably an under-evaluation of Minnesota's roster because they returned pretty much everyone, and they got gutted by COVID last year. So you have a lot of experience returning combined with an undervalued roster because a lot of it didn't get to see meaningful playing time last year. You also, on the Ohio State side of things, have, in all likelihood, C.J. Stroud making not only his first start, but it's a road start. I've already told you how I feel about the enhanced value of home field advantage, especially first half of the college football season this fall. And you may even have the look-ahead angle here. How many times, I think famously last year, Iowa State fit this description. How many times have we seen high expectation and you see a week 1 game that you've already sort of looked past, but it's like a 13 and a half point spread, so the odds makers are telling you don't look past this. And you look past it and boom, all of a sudden your buddy's texting you, hey, are you watching this Ohio State-Minnesota game? No, I'm out to eat. I'm at Chili's with my buddies. What's happening? And then they text back, what are you doing at Chili's? And then secondly, they say, you need to turn this on. Or maybe if it's a reputable Chili's, they should have it on. Because Minnesota's leading 33-30. It's a wild shootout. Whomst saw this coming? Well, AFP, at the very least, along with many more of you in my mentions, say that you may see it coming. So there's that, and I want to bookmark that because I'm not done talking about this whole concept of major top 5 upsets early in the year. Here's another one that I think a vast majority of you mentioned if you were giving me lists. I got a lot of Miami over Alabama in week 1. So that one was really popular. But combined with that, I wanted to go to another team in the state of Florida because a lot of you also said, look at week 3. Look at all these big early season tests for the big boys. What about Alabama going to the swamp week 3? What if Florida takes down Alabama? Now, this is going to be our first real taste of Florida. See, we get to see Bama against Miami in the season opener. You're seeing Alabama's schedule right now. And, let's not overlook the Mercer Bears in week 2. Far be it for us to do that. But with Florida, I think they play Florida Atlantic. They play USF. I looked at our odds-making model. We would favor them by about 4 touchdowns or more in both of their first 2 games. So Dan Mullen doesn't really have to open it up, you would think. And so week 3, not only does Florida get that supreme benefit of an early season raucous home environment at the Swamp, Alabama comes in there with a new quarterback of their own in Bryce Young. Now, you think Alabama in the past has just been borderline invincible. They've been immune to a lot of these college football factors that would impact lesser programs or mortal programs. Maybe, but we don't know. We don't know what Alabama is going to be yet. And so there's that. But then within the context of this potential Ohio State loss and a potential Alabama loss, a lot of you took the added liberty of just saying, all right, well, let's just say if both of those are going to happen, let's just go ahead and say Georgia beats Clemson in week 1, too. Well, if that were to happen, friends, we would have a week 4 starting with Bama, Clemson, and Ohio State all with a loss on the resume. Now, if any combination of that happens, in and of itself, it's newsworthy. But if we were to not even make it through the first quarter of the season before the Buckeyes, Tide, and Tigers all had losses, How's that for your precious parity? How's that for balancing your sport out? We didn't even have to expand the playoff to get all that. That would be obviously a huge newsmaker in the world of college football. But we weren't done. You guys were just getting warmed up. So then we move on, and then someone mentioned Florida State. And someone mentioned Mackenzie Milton. We talked about this a lot. About a month ago, we did a couple of shows on it. What if Mackenzie Milton is not only all the way healed, I mean, what if he's healed and then some? What if he is not only what he once was, but he's performing equal to or maybe even better than the level you saw? Now, a lot of you would say that's unlikely to very unlikely, but not impossible. As long as it's not impossible, it has a home in this particular segment. If that were to happen, then a lot of you kicked the following scenario. Mackenzie Milton is far above and beyond expectation level, and as a result, Florida State shocks Notre Dame in week 1. It's the total inverse of what happened last year when Georgia Tech upset Notre Dame or upset Florida State in week 1 at Doak. And so here's what happens in all likelihood. If Florida State is good enough to beat Notre Dame, then they're probably also good enough to be 6-0 on October 9th when they go to North Carolina, at which point our buddies over at College Football Nerds chime in and say, well, if they're going that far, why don't we just have them go into Chapel Hill and beat North Carolina, at which point not only do we have to totally reassess the ACC and reassess what Florida State is, but we may be looking in the mirror and saying, did we overvalue North Carolina? Where is North Carolina at that point? That would be a huge shakeup in the ACC. I haven't talked about the Big 12 yet. Well, that's about to change in 3, 2, 1. What about Iowa State? My Cyclones. Side note, I'm at the gym in Columbus, Georgia the other night. I had to go home, and I'm with a buddy, and there's one other gentleman in the gym. It's just us three. It's like 9:30 at night. Keep in mind, the pinpoint on the map is Columbus, Georgia. We get through with our workout. My guy's walking out. He turns back around, comes up to me, and proceeds to thank me for all the Iowa State coverage. Says he grew up in Cedar Rapids, lifelong Iowa State fan, stationed at Fort Benning. That's why he's down in Columbus. And we had a nice 5 or 10 minute chat about the inner workings of Iowa State athletics. It was one of the top 10 moments of my life. I don't think I'm overstating that, Colin. Top 10 life moment for me, right there talking Iowa State football at 9:30 at night at a gym in Columbus, Georgia. With that in mind, what if Iowa State wins the Big 12 this year? I think you'd have varying degrees of surprise. I can't label this a shocker. I mean, it's one of the top 10 teams in the country coming into this season in any given poll you look at. So it wouldn't be the biggest shock in the world. They return the entire team virtually from one that played for a Big 12 title last year, and I feel like they were about minus half a dozen turnovers in that game. If you can't tell, I still carry a little bit of that in my heart, a little bit of that pain. But if they win the Big 12, it's a huge feather in the cap for Matt Campbell. It's a huge feather in the cap for the Iowa State Cyclones. And I probably get a lower back tattoo commemorating the occasion. But my follow-up on that, if this were to occur, is what's happened to Oklahoma? Is this one of those situations, because these teams theoretically would play twice in this scenario, is this one of those deals where Oklahoma beats Iowa State in the regular season and then they follow it up a couple of weeks later with a poor turnover performance of their own and Iowa State clips them 30-27, but that's Oklahoma's only loss and they're still in the playoff? Or is this a situation where Iowa State beats Oklahoma twice and Oklahoma, after coming in with the Heisman Trophy favorite, #1 in many reputable preseason publications, they don't even make the playoff and they don't win their own conference for the first time in seemingly forever? How would that change the perception of Lincoln Riley? Like this takeaway, even though it's about Iowa State, has a lot more Oklahoma dripping from it than Iowa State, because we know what we feel, for better or for slightly less better, about Iowa State. So there's that. But then I think the biggest overall shocker to me, even out of all the scenarios we've just presented, the one where someone said, what if a Pac-12 team wins the national championship? That's the one that made me drop the pen, and I crossed the arms, and I had to save the pen from going off the desk. And I crossed the arms and I said, Colin, should we even put this in the show? Because we said it has to be realistic. And in the interest of fairness and in the interest of honoring mathematics, the percentage chance of this happening does just meet the minimum baseline requirement that we are going to honor it. What if a Pac-12 team wins the national championship? Now, I asked for what would shake up college football in 2021. Well, this would shake up college football in 2021 and beyond. I've got to think we're only talking about 2 teams here. All due respect to Washington, I do not think the maximum capacity of that team is that of championship. could very well be playoff. In fact, they may have better playoff odds than Oregon and USC, even though those are the two teams I'm telling you are the only two with the overall talent roster probably capable of pulling this very, very thread the eye of a needle sort of scenario off. But Oregon and USC, if one of them wins the national championship, I don't know how it happens. Obviously, quarterback comes through and the whole team has to come through. But that would turn college football on its ear because all of a sudden you'd have to sing a different tune about the Pac-12, obviously. And think about being the brand new commissioner. The commissioner of the Pac-12 is so new, I haven't even learned how to pronounce his last name. Full disclosure. But imagine being Mr. Commissioner and you walk in and then Oregon or Southern Cal just hands you a national championship on a silver platter right as you're getting ready to go into new TV negotiations with not only traditionals but also new age streaming platforms. All of a sudden, you get to swagger a little bit when you walk in the room. Your shoulders, you don't feel slouched over. You got really good big chest posture, and all of a sudden the Pac-12 matters again. You got to take us seriously again. Hey, I can't say I would hate it. It would be very good for college football. Now, some others that I thought merited some discussion before we move on. Ohio State opening 0-2. So this obviously goes off the Minnesota pulls the upset over Ohio State, but then they don't recover the next week and Oregon beats them. That would be the biggest story in college football this year. Outside of some ridiculous scandal unfolding, Ryan Day and the Buckeyes, they get to the national championship game. Folks like me are telling you next to Nick Saban, I take Ryan Day over anyone. And then they start 0-2. Colin, the more I think about it, this will be detrimental for the show. So let's go for the split at least if we're in Columbus. Cincinnati being undefeated this year. And some of you said, what if Cincinnati beats Indiana and Notre Dame? They played both of them this year. And then they win their conference title, but they still don't go to the playoff. I'm going to put it on record right now. If Cincinnati's undefeated, they're in the playoff. I know there's this misnomer out there, and I think that's exactly what it is, that the G5 is just outright barred. There's one of those imaginary fences, and the G5 has a shot collar on it, and if they ever try and get in the playoff, they get zapped. No, there's no G5 team that has ever warranted a spot in the playoff over the 4 that have been selected. But if Cincinnati wins their conference, they beat 2 Power 5s that a lot is expected of in Notre Dame and Indiana at some point this year or any point this year. If that's the resume, I think they're going to be in the playoff. I don't care if there's a G5 sticker on their helmet or not. And last I checked, they do not make G5 stickers. Georgia doesn't win the SEC East was one that some of you floated. Now, that would be uncomfortable for a lot of folks. And one of them has the initials KS. That would be uncomfortable. Florida's got to play LSU and Bama this year. Georgia doesn't have to play either one of them. Georgia has a tailor-made schedule. They got a tailor-made quarterback situation. It's the best overall shot they've got to make some postseason noise in a run where they've already been to a national title game. If they don't win the East, there's a lot of rethinking going on there. How about Arkansas beats not only Texas in week 2, but Texas A&M in week 4? Arkansas is 2-0 against the state of Texas, and we're not even out of September yet. The ACC grades out as the best overall conference in America. Now, that one sounds crazy, but you got to remember the ACC has the best quarterback situation by a little ways in America this year. I know that a lot of the spotlight's on DJ Uiagalelei, but what would make this come to fruition is the 13 other returning quarterbacks with starting experience all up and down the ACC roster, and then Clemson also coming through. So you'd have Clemson being their usual powerhouse, and then you'd have several other legitimate programs playing top 10, top 15 caliber ball. I'm thinking Miami, I'm thinking North Carolina. You'd need a Boston College or a Virginia Tech to pop at some point this year. All that plus, I think some of the national powers have to fall down to earth, or either you get national powers and just a bunch of garbage underneath them in multiple conferences. This was a fun exercise. Something tells me, and that something's going to be the comment section on this video, something tells me we're not going to be done with that. So feel free to submit, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, at LateKickJosh, or right here in the comment section. Give me the plausible scenario that would totally turn college football on its ear in 2021 if it were to indeed happen.